All right, today we're diving into a ghost story that, well, it totally breaks all the rules. This didn't happen in some spooky, dark old house. Nope. This happened in the bright, busy cabin of a commercial airliner, and it was seen by dozens of totally credible people. So, let's just start with the big question here. How is it even possible for a ghost to be seen by multiple crew members and even passengers, all at the same time? That is the absolute core of the mystery of Flight 401. You know how most ghost stories go, right? It's usually one person, alone in the dark, who sees a fleeting glimpse of something. But the story of Flight 401, it's completely different. We're talking about a group phenomenon with real, tangible warnings. And that's what makes this case so unique and so incredibly unsettling. To really get what's going on with these hauntings, we've got to go back to where it all began. Back to the tragedy itself. It all started with a single moment of distraction that had absolutely devastating consequences. So here are the basics. We're talking December 29, 1972, a holiday flight from New York down to Florida. It was a totally routine trip on a modern L-1011 TriStar with a very experienced crew. But as they got ready to land in Miami, everything was about to go horribly, horribly wrong. And you won't believe what caused it all. It was a single burnt-out light bulb. I'm not kidding. The entire cockpit crew got so focused on this one tiny problem that nobody noticed the plane was silently, invisibly descending. By the time anyone realized what was happening, it was just too late. The crash of Flight 401 was a national tragedy. In the end, 101 people lost their lives that night, including the captain, Bob Loft, and his flight engineer, Don Repo. But for them, their story was far from over. So let's see how this thing builds, because the crash, believe it or not, was just the beginning. This is where the story takes a sharp turn into one of the strangest hauntings ever recorded. Now, to save a bit of money, the airline did something that's actually pretty common in the industry. They salvaged undamaged parts from the wreckage and used them to fix up other planes in their fleet. It's a practice called cannibalization. And in this case, it had some very uncommon side effects. And that's when things got weird. Very weird. Soon after those parts were installed, flight crews on those specific aircraft, the ones with the pieces of Flight 401, started reporting some really unsettling and frankly inexplicable events. And this right here is what made these sightings so bizarre. You've got the flight attendant who is having a totally normal conversation, she thinks. But then the passengers sitting nearby, they just see her standing in the aisle, talking to thin air. The encounters were both real and not real, all at the same time. And these ghosts weren't just random shadows either. They were often identified as the actual deceased crew of Flight 401. They'd show up in the cockpit, in the kitchen galley, even sitting among the passengers, and then just vanish. It became this known kind of unspoken phenomenon among the airline staff. But these strange sightings, which up to this point were creepy, for sure, but mostly harmless, well, that was all about to change. Things were about to escalate into something way more urgent and, frankly, terrifying on one very specific flight. So picture this. Flight 318, another plane that had salvaged parts from the crash. It's packed to the gills, over 180 people on board for the holidays. And on this flight, something truly extraordinary was about to happen. A flight attendant named Faye Merriweather is just doing her job in the galley when she happens to glance at the reflection in a metal oven door. But it's not her face looking back at her. It's the face of a man, and he is trying to tell her something. The words were crystal clear, urgent, and absolutely terrifying. Watch out for fire on this airplane. This wasn't just a random haunting. This was a warning. And here's the kicker. This wasn't just in Faye's head. The flight engineer comes over, he sees the face too, and he recognizes him. It's Don Repo, the flight engineer who died on Flight 401. And then other crew members and even some passengers start hearing that same disembodied warning. So the crew is, as you can imagine, completely shaken up. But they take this warning from beyond the grave very, very seriously. And what happened next proved they were absolutely right to do so. Now, the plane landed safely that night, no problems. It was a close call, but nothing happened. But on its very next flight, one of the engines failed completely. The ghost's warning, it had come true. It became clear that Don Repo's ghost wasn't some malevolent spirit. He was like a guardian angel, trying to protect the passengers and crew from the same awful fate that he'd suffered. He was a hero.
At this point, the airline just couldn't ignore it anymore. They ordered every single salvaged part from Flight 401 to be removed from their entire fleet. A crew member even performed an exorcism on Flight 318, and just like that, the sighting stopped. End of story, right?
Well, maybe not. This is where we get to the really unsettling part of the story. The official version ends right there, with the parts removed and the ghosts gone. But legends, they have a way of sticking around.
What if they didn't find all the parts? I mean, it's a big fleet, a lot of planes. What if some of those haunted pieces of Flight 401 are still out there, flying on other planes, just waiting? It's a final, chilling thought that leaves this whole mystery not entirely in the past. It raises the question, if a piece of a tragedy is still flying, do its ghosts fly with it?